Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of True Crime with Caitlyn. I'm jumping on your feed with a little midweek mini. I have been covering true crime cases for so long that I really want to highlight some of the cases that I covered years ago that some of me new listeners and followers may not have heard, and I thought that this would be the perfect place and perfect way to do it. On Friday's episode, the Kilgore KFC massacre, I mentioned how Texas Rangers enlisted the help of psychics, hoping that they would be able to glean some evidence or at least a lead for them to follow. It wasn't successful in that case, but today I'm going to tell you about a time when a psychic did help solve a murder. This is the murder of Elizabeth Cornish. Elizabeth Cornish was a 42-year-old divorced mother of 5 who was working as a nurse. Following the divorce from her ex-husband, she moved to Belvidere, New Jersey in order to be closer to her family. Elizabeth was described as a fun-loving, kind, affectionate woman who loved to dance, and before long, she began a new relationship with a man named Paul. On the 8th of August 1987, 911 received a frantic phone call from a man who was hysterically telling the dispatcher that he had just found his girlfriend dead in her apartment. Police rushed to the scene, and that is when they would discover the body of Elizabeth lay in her bed. She was bound with electrical wire and lay face up on her bed. She had very clearly been beaten over the head, being struck at least 21 times so severely that her skull had become exposed. Blood soaked every surface of the small bedroom, the bed that she lay on, and her nightie was pulled above her head, alluding to a sexual assault. Police began to conduct door-to-door inquiries, thinking, surely this was an apartment block, someone must have heard or saw something. I used to live in a flat and I heard everything my upstairs neighbour did, including blast and rave all through Christmas Day. But on this occasion, here in Elizabeth's apartment block, no one did. No one heard a single sound. Almost all of the neighbours voluntarily took polygraph tests and they all passed, so each of them were ruled out. So, suspicion quickly turned to Elizabeth's new boyfriend Paul, who refused to speak with police and quickly hired a lawyer. Just over a week after the discovery of her body and virtually no movement being made in the case, Elizabeth's family became desperate, and so one of her sisters contacted psychic Nancy Weber. Nancy knew nothing about Elizabeth, nothing about her case, and after just one meeting with Elizabeth's sister, Nancy could tell through visions that Elizabeth's death had been absolutely heinous and that Paul was wrongly the prime suspect. Nancy reaches out to the police offering her help, and with nothing to lose, they accepted it and they took her to the crime scene. When she arrived, Nancy had a vision which showed her the entire murder. The murder weapon being a hammer, the time of death likely being around 1:30 a.m, and the killer. She saw a man walking up some stairs and out of nowhere she named him as John R. She perfectly described John wearing a distinct Western style belt buckle. John R. wasn't a new name to the police. They recognised it. They had spoken to someone called John R. One of Elizabeth's upstairs neighbours was a man named John Reese. Investigators didn't think that John was their killer though, because he had passed the polygraph already and he had an alibi. However, following the tip from Nancy's visions, investigators decided to take a closer look into him. When they began properly looking into John, they found that he was known for wearing a distinct Western-style belt buckle identical to what Nancy had described to them. When they further questioned his alibi, they would realise that it was shaky at best. He would change details until he eventually outright said that he didn't know what he was doing at the time that the murder took place. But police would end up discovering a damning piece of evidence, one that John couldn't talk his way out of, and that was his fingerprint being found inside of Elizabeth's apartment, on the window that investigators believe the killer used to gain entry and then leave the apartment. John tried to say that Elizabeth had asked him to fix the window for her a little while back, but that was a complete lie. After around about half an hour of intense interrogation, John Reese would confess to the murder of Elizabeth Cornish. He told police that he had disposed of the murder weapon, a hammer, in a small bit of swampy water on a farm that he worked at, and that just so happened to be where Nancy claimed she had a vision of. Everything that she saw in connection with Elizabeth's murder turned out to be true. John Reese would go on to be sentenced to 110 years imprisonment for the brutal murder of Elizabeth Cornish. I'm really interested to know what you all think, if you believe in psychics and third eyes and life after death and things like that, because I really do believe in it. Thank you for joining me on today's midweek mini episode. Please make sure to let me know if you would like to hear more of these, and I'll see you all on Friday with another new episode.